Former actors at Disney parks. What's the weirdest thing that happened to you while you were in character? I dated a girl that played one of the fairies for the Tinkerbell place. Beyond the pretty much daily occurrence of old dads hitting on her, she was 19 at the time, the weirdest thing to happen to her was a woman with a 4-year-old little girl was all excited to get a picture with Tinkerbell, who was busy, so my ex volunteered to do pictures and entertain the little girl while they waited. The woman was a bitch about that idea, rudely saying she was here to see Tinkerbell and not off-brand fairies. So just shrugging it off, my ex moved on. A bit later, she hears a commotion and Tinkerbell is obviously upset, and security shows up. Apparently, this woman was Tinkerbell's biomom and had taken her granddaughter to Disney, just to violate the restraining order against her. Disney jail is a real place. I was a mouse height performer at Disney World around 2013. Can unfortunately confirm groping happened from time to time and it was incredibly uncomfortable. We were trained to move away if we could and signal to the character attendants to escort the guest away if it happened. One time some guy thought it appropriate to pick me up completely off the ground in a bear hug. The head pushed back and, because the inside is connected to us with headgear and a chin strap, my neck bent back with it and it hurt like hell. Not a weird story, but one of my most memorable guest experiences was meeting a little blind boy as Mickey in Epcot. I gently guided his hands to the soft ears, then the nose, and bow tie and he was laughing and his smile lit up the whole room. I still get emotional thinking about it. Interactions like that made it all worth it to me at the time. Somebody offered me $400 to have sex with him while in my Goofy costume. Makes awkward Goofy laugh. I was playing Goofy inside a restaurant and I got swarmed alien style by a horde of 10-year-old kids. Unfortunately, while I was playing around with them, the inner hood below the mask slipped over my eyes and I was completely blinded. We had assistants around whom we could signal for help by flapping our arms, but the kids had made it a game of attaching themselves Tarzan-like to both my arms, and to raise them I would have had to lift 3 to 4 kids per arm. Dangerous even if I'd been strong enough to do that. I found myself blind and completely rooted to the spot, unable to ask for help and with nobody realizing that I was in trouble. I spent like a solid 10 to 15 minutes in that sort of limbo, reflecting on the life decisions that had taken me there, until the assistant came over and whispered, "Set is over, dude," and I finally managed to signal something was wrong. Not Disney, but mildly funny. In the 90s, my mom used to work for the company that owns Kool-Aid. She was over several commissaries, military-based grocery stores, and I usually did odd work for her like stocking or building displays. A few times, I got to put on the Kool-Aid Man costume. It was hard to see anything since the viewports were the eyes, mouth, and they were super dark tinted plastic. I was placed in between 2 racks of snack cakes and was scared to move much as I might knock them over. So I stood there for probably a half hour still as a statue while waiting to see people. This small kid, maybe 3 or 4, comes up to me with his mom. His eyes were so big and he was adorably in awe. I saw him and bent down to say hello and scared the living hell out of that poor kid. He bolted directly away from me, screaming in terror. I lumbered after him for about 5 steps, trying to placate him and tell him I was friendly, before realizing I was just making more nightmare fuel for this poor little dude. His mom was laughing so hard she fell on her ass. I was pretend gang raped by a crowd of drunk Brazilians while working as the NASCAR mascot at Universal Studios. I quit the next day. Edit. 1. I'm fine. This was 10 years ago too. I was in a costume that had limited vision and mobility, so it was not exactly easy to just leave the situation, and I had been separated from my handler at the time. 6 to 8 drunk Brazilians hoisted me in the air, prostrated me and simulated the deed while the rest of the party cheered and laughed. Never was an actor, but when I was a kid at Disney World in the 70s, I watched Chip get into a fistfight with a young 20-something guy. The guy's girlfriend wanted him to do a picture with Chip and Dale, but he didn't want to. Chip grabbed him in a headlock and his girlfriend snapped the photo. When Chip let go, the guy came up swinging. Dale had to jump in and break them up, as Chip started swinging back. For a kid of 12, it was awesome. Not a cast member, but either Mickey or Minnie cut a very audible fart while posing with my wife and me. It must have been awful inside that Dutch oven of a costume. I knew a friend, a guy, who wore Minnie Mouse costume. He told me almost all guys would put their hands around his waist. He wouldn't dare to talk or else they will hear his manly voice and that might piss them off. Edit. This blows up quickly. I feel I need to let people know that it's not okay to grope the Disney characters. My friend had introduced me to the people who play them and they're just normal people. All I can tell you is that they will make a disgusting face under the mask and talk shit about you later after work. Dated an actress. The weirdest she had was a man asking for him to be in the suit for an hour. He offered her $3,000. I used to beat Tinker Bell. The understudy. Lol, I couldn't do it full time. Weirdest thing is the dads low-key hitting on you. Kids are kids, they do weird shit but don't mean it. The adults know they're being weird but for some reason just don't care. Like, don't talk about my looks in front of your kids or try to cop a feel, it's cringe. It happened so often that we had guards, watchers all over the place just in case someone got handsy, and it happened too many times to count upside down face. Funny story. My username is named after an encounter I had with a Tinker Bell at Walt Disney World, Orlando in October 2015. My friends and I decided to go to Disney World and Universal to have some fun as I just got back from a non-combat deployment. Kinda celebrate coming home, but it was more to just have fun together. However, at this time, no one in my life knew I was extremely suicidal. The thoughts, the anxiety, the depression, the plans to do it. All of it. And I masked it all as best I could. During the trip, I was doing my best to mask and trying to ensure everyone was having a good time. However, I couldn't shake the depression, suicidal thoughts and even the plans to do it. At this point, I couldn't mask anymore and this most likely ruined their time on the trip. Eventually, I think on the last day, we make it to Tinker Bell to meet and take pictures. My friends at the time egged me on to get a picture with her to cheer me up. Throughout that day, I believe I had a few teary-eyed moments by myself and I was visibly depressed. I honestly probably had red puffy eyes, too. I don't know if the Tinker Bell knew I was depressed, or it was something I or a friend said, or she just gives cheek kisses every now and then, but she gave me an unexpected smooch on the cheek and I proceeded to light up like a Christmas tree. To me, it was just the act of unexpected generosity, kindness, and affection from a complete stranger that made me feel like the lingering grey cloud disappeared, even if it was for a brief passing moment. Here's the picture. https://i.imager.com/c2pmd.jpg. The following week after the trip, I called and scheduled myself into therapy. My friends and I actually split shortly after getting into therapy. I don't blame them. Because of it all, I got the professional help I needed. I got on meds that help. I met my girlfriend, now wife, got a bunch of pets to love, bought a house, and just overall made a better life of myself. My suicidal thoughts, ideations, plans are behind me, although the thoughts do still pop up every now and then, but they're not as bad as they were 8 years ago. That actress. Her brief moment, just in passing, helped me. She unknowingly saved my life. I keep this picture on my refrigerator door and sometimes it brings a smile to me when I need it most. My wife also loves this picture because she knows the story behind it. She also thanks this Tinker Bell for saving my life. It's also a great conversation starter when we have guests over. Bonus. I also held Gaston, http://i.imager.com/yosmorph1.jpg in my arms. I used to work at a different amusement park that featured similar costumed characters. The worst thing I ever heard was the time one of the characters was overcome by heat in 95-degree weather, and vomited inside the suit, splattering the inside of the suit's head with their half-digested lunch. They had to walk a long distance back to the dressing rooms breathing the superheated vomit air the entire way. My ex-wife was in the character department at Disney World years ago. She was always getting injured by guests. From macho men wanting to see how strong of a grip Mickey had, to grabbing hold of Donald's bill and yanking really hard. Pulling noses, beaks, ears, etc., can really hurt people. Another person was dressed as Daisy Duck and got tackled by a guest and knocked out cold. When she recovered, she pressed charges. The worst nights for the characters were high school senior nights and the religious group nights. Bunch of unruly teens with little to no supervision. No one wanted to work those shifts. Ever. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes. For those wondering about the religious nights, it was called Night of Joy. Usually had a few religious pop rock groups that gave small concerts while the park was open. The teens were just not properly supervised, and they acted wilder than you would think on this sort of night. Everyone hated working those shifts. Disney cancelled Night of Joy in 2018 after 34 years. Most cast members were relieved. Repost from a guy who played Goofy from a couple years ago. I have one moment that stands out above all the rest. I was waiting for someone to ask me this question. It's the reason I left a good job as a VIP tour guide and moved to the character department. I was working City Hall one day when two guests came in with two little girls. One was in a wheelchair and the other one looked like she had just seen death. Both were cut and bruised, and the one in the wheelchair had her arm in a cast. The two women were actually nurses from a hospital and were asking for a refund on the girls' tickets, something we avoided doing at all costs. When I asked why, they told me the story. The two girls were with their mom and dad at Epcot, and on the way home they got into a horrible car accident. The mother was beheaded right in front of them. The father eventually died too, but the two girls didn't know that yet. They were from overseas and had no money and no contact information for anyone they knew. They were bringing the tickets back to get the girls some much needed money to help get them back home. My heart absolutely sunk. If you had seen these girls, you'd know why. They were truly traumatized. I refunded their tickets and got permission to be their private tour guide for the rest of the day, which they were not expecting. I walked them to the VIP viewing area for the parade, which was as far as I could walk them in the costume we used to wear at City Hall. I had to leave them there while I put on my VIP costume. On the way down, I pulled out every kid joke I could think of. I was a really good tour guide, I helped write part of it, and I knew how to make kids smile. Nothing worked. These girls were too far gone for that. I left them at the bridge to go change, walked backstage and bawled my eyes out. I just had never seen something so horrible. I was truly affected, and it was a terrible feeling of powerlessness not being able to fix the situation. When I came back, I brought them to get ice cream, take them on rides and stuff, but they never smiled, not once. The nurses were loving it and were trying to get them into it, but it just wasn't working. We went back to the bridge to watch the parade. It was there that I honestly saw true magic. Real magic, not bullshit. I had called the parade department to let them know what was going on and set up a private meet and greet after the parade. As the parade was coming around Liberty Square, I told the girls that I had called Mickey and told him all about them. I told them that Mickey asked to meet them after the parade. The little girl in the wheelchair smiled. "Really?" she asked. My heart skipped. "Yes, really. He told me to tell you to look out for him in the parade and to follow the float back to City Hall." The other girl smiled. "You mean right now?" she asked. It had worked. They were talking. Not laughing, but talking. It was the first time I had heard them speak. Every single parade performer came up to them on the bridge and told them to look out for Mickey. Every one of them told them that. When Mickey's float came up, Mickey, who was attached to a pole at the top of the float, managed to turn her body sideways, look down at the girls and point towards Main Street. That was all it took. The girls were excited now. They had forgotten about death. They were lost in a magical world, and I couldn't believe I was watching it unfold in front of my eyes. We followed that float all the way back to City Hall, singing Mickey Mania the whole way. Back then, City Hall used to have a VIP lounge behind the desk that was for privacy during difficult situations or to host celebrities. I took them in and showed them the book where all of the autographs were. They were eating it up. The girl who was Mickey that day got down off her float and without even taking her head off walked up to me backstage and said, "Let's go." I walked in with Mickey behind me, so I got to see the exact moment the girls met their new friend. They got shy, but Mickey was in control now. Those girls met the real Mickey Mouse that day. Every single parade character stayed dressed to meet those girls. One by one they'd come in and play a bit, then leave. We were in that lounge for over an hour. Mickey stayed in costume the entire time, which is hard to do after a parade. When Mickey finally said goodbye, I had two excited girls on my hands that couldn't stop smiling. They talked and talked and talked. We had a wonderful day after that, but what I remember most is when we walked by the rose garden, the older one said, "Oh, my mommy loves roses. I mean," and she stopped. I held out my hand and walked her to the gate, picked her up and put her on the other side and said, "Pick one." She looked happy as she picked out her favorite rose. She didn't say anything more, and she didn't need to. I said goodbye to the wonderful nurses and the wonderful girls, then walked backstage behind the train station. This time I didn't cry. It felt so good to be a part of that. I realized that as much as I liked helping guests at City Hall, the true magic of Disney was in the character department. I auditioned, transferred, and never looked back. Thanks for letting me relive this. It was a special day for me. I used to be the Easter Bunny at a function hall, and people were just weird. I've been threatened by a guy that told me he was going to throw me down the stairs. It's hot, too. Some kids were really happy to get a picture, so it made it all worthwhile. I had a female friend who played Pluto for a few years. Even though her gender was indistinguishable because it's a fully body Pluto costume, she would regularly share how often she was groped by kids and adults alike. In costume she looked like she was 6'6", but was only 5'8" in real life. You couldn't tell the gender of any of the 3 to 4 in Pluto rotation, and you could barely tell them apart. Not an actor, but was at Disneyland in 21 and walked past some stormtroopers. One of them said to me, "Keep that little droid in check," referring to my youngest daughter, so now every time she sees a stormtrooper she always says, "Dad, remember that time at Disneyland one of them talked to you?" I was Chip and Dale in land, and some dad came up with his kids. I was doing my thing and having fun with them. When it came time for pics, the dad comes over to join us, and all is well until after the picture when he asked for a hug, so I gave him one. He squeezed, pulled away, grabbed his kid's hands, smiled and said, "I didn't know Dale was a girl under all that fur." I played it off at the time, but it made me really uncomfortable that he had actually squeezed hard enough to feel me under my costume. Decided to wear binders while I was in character so that no one else could ever feel my boobs again through the suit. This was back in 2019. That's a gross way to phrase it, but as a teen I was shocked to realize I could see through the mesh of the character heads when close up. It looked so opaque from a distance, and the accidental eye contact inside a cartoon animal's mouth felt super awkward. I was part of the Disney College program, and I have my own stories, but not as a character. My mom, on the other hand, she was a character actor back in the day, 60s or 70s. They were testing a new headpiece for the 7 dwarf costumes in Disneyland, and my mom wore one of them out on a march with Snow White. As a dwarf, your head is inside their hat, their face on their stomach, etc. Being Anaheim, It was really hot that summer day, and as they were going around following Snow White, a little kid saw my mom, Doc. He ran up to give her a hug. As he was hugging Doc, the plastic that made up the face started melting inwards and the child started screaming, "I killed Doc. I killed Doc," in hysterics. Character handlers rushed my mom, Doc, off through one of the secret passages by pirates and got her out of the costume before the plastic could melt onto her. Always thought it was a fun story and curious how much it screwed up that kid. That memory was definitely repressed, lol. The number of people that feel comfortable grabbing your crotch or hitting you in the head. Not just kids. I squeezed Goofy's nose when I was little and he pretended to cry, and I still live with the shame. Not quite the correct answer, but still a fairly relevant story to the question. When I was a young and shy boy, we went to Disney World, and at one point we planned on getting some pictures with Mickey and Minnie Mouse. Before we got any pictures taken with them, Minnie apparently took a liking to me and started pointing to me and blowing kisses at me, to which my young self responded by nervously hiding behind my parents' legs. Seeing this, she then walked over and attempted to hug me, which caused me to sprint away, but she ran after me with her arms still held out for a hug. We didn't go overly far, and on return my mom managed to get me to give Minnie a hug with some persuasion. Every so often, the time Minnie Mouse fell in love with me and chased me around Disney World comes up at the dinner table again. At the time I was terrified, but looking back, that is actually a really wholesome memory that I have. I was one of the performers for Nick Wilde from Zootopia a few years ago, and if you're not aware, a large number of people in the furry community find him highly attractive. You can just imagine the number of people in that community who flirted with me and/or Judy and whispered some pretty sexual things to us. I think I also had a guy grab Nick's tie like in that flirty way. We had to get him escorted out of the park. The moral of the story is, don't be inappropriate with the characters. We are real people underneath, and there are legitimate consequences for that kind of behavior. If Mickey Mouse from Disney Florida 1993 is on Reddit, I'm sincerely sorry for punching you in the face. I was 2 and didn't like my personal space being invaded. Long story short. Not a former costume actor, but I did interact with one. This happened over 25 years ago. My wife surprised me with a trip to SeaWorld in Ohio. Inside the gate was the costume actor for Shamu. Since my wife is short and I am tall, the actor sat down on the bench with me on one side and my wife on the other to have our photograph taken. Shamu held us in close and my hand naturally fell on their thigh. I'm feeling a roll in the plush fabric and imagining how hot it must feel inside that costume when I realized that it was his penis I was feeling up. Picture is taken with Shamu's dork in my hand and we leave the area. My wife falls over laughing as I tell her what happened. She asks if it was a happy ending.